There are limited tax dollars in the state of Illinois and a lot of priorities. But when you've got things like the ongoing migrant crisis costing taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars and recently enacted programs to spend hundreds of millions more, plus all of the pension obligations the state has, how do you prioritize all of this? Welcome back, Bishop on Air. I'm Greg Bishop. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. I cover the Illinois State House for the Center Square, and you can find all that work at thecentersquare.com. And Governor J.B. Pritzker, he's been making the rounds across the state, touting his Smart Start early childhood education program. And the conversation is also about priorities. So the governor was actually down in Belleville yesterday, and then rather earlier this week he was in Belleville. Yesterday he was in Rochester, just outside of Springfield, and then he traveled up to Peoria to promote his Smart Start early childhood education program. It's $250 million, part of the current state budget that ends at the end of June this year, and it's opening up childcare seats. It's opening up positions within daycares, for instance. In K through 12, obviously they get a lot of money, but there's not been enough focus, some say, on early childhood programs, and there are what they call child care deserts, where there's not enough choices for people to take their child to have daycare while they go off and make a living for their family. So the governor announced the Smart Starts program, where it's going to spend $250 million to subsidize child care pay in some areas, to help build out child care centers. And he's touting that their goal of 5,000 new child care seats across the state, they surpassed that goal. I want to say they got close to 6,000 extra seats. So he's advancing this, wanting to get this into the budget for next year as well. But clearly, $250 million, it's a $250 million. The state's budget was a little over $50 billion, I believe. We'll see what the numbers come in to be here soon. But, is that something that's going to be sustainable? Especially considering all of the other pressures that there are on state spending, on taxpayer resources. Pensions takes one out of every $5. So we spend about $10 billion on the state's pension system in Illinois, and we're still $140 billion unfunded liability. But every year we spend about $10 billion on pensions. K through 12 education, we spend about $10 billion on K through 12 education. So you've got all the other government services that need to be operated. So clearly, there's a lot of priorities when it comes to how your tax dollars are spent. Well, after the governor was talking about the Smart Start program in Rochester, I asked him about how do you continue this type of program moving forward with things like, for instance, the migrant crisis and the hundreds of millions of dollars that are being spent on that ongoing issue. Here's the governor.
Well, let me be clear. We've been balancing the budget every single year I've been in office. We're going to continue to balance the budget. This is a high priority. Every time anyone asks me about whether something should be funded and whether we should continue to fund something, it's all a question of priorities. I think the members of the General Assembly and I talk about this all the time, across the aisle too, about what are our priorities, where are we going to put resources, and if we don't have enough resources for everything that everybody wants, what can we look to do in the future, or what should we stop doing in order to make sure we're balancing expenditures with revenues?
So yes. Again, the governor talking about balancing the budget and how he's done it the past 5 years. Of course, you had billions of dollars going to the state coffers during the COVID-19 pandemic, but the governor and Democrats say that's not what's helping them balance the budget. However, moving forward, they're looking at possible deficits now that those COVID dollars have dried up. But if we're looking at possible deficits, which could be, $600-700 million possibly? I'm not sure of the exact numbers. We'll get to all of the budget season stuff in the weeks ahead when the General Assembly comes back. But clearly, there's going to be a crunch. And new programs, when you might not have as much revenue coming in, are hard to sustain. So that's really, listen, the Smart Start program, a shared priority for Republicans and Democrats, I'm hearing at the State House, but about the priorities of spending, especially when you've got an unknown amount of money being spent on the migrant crisis. I talked with Republican State Representative Mike Coffey yesterday about the spending priorities, especially with those pressures of the migrant crisis in Illinois. Here's what he had to say.
Well, I'm very concerned because, like here today, we're here about Smart Start, and those are shared priorities by Republicans, Democrats. And what I'm concerned about as we go forward into the General Assembly and money becomes tighter and tighter and tighter after we've gone through COVID and all that, what are we going to do for these type of programs? And this migrant crisis, having gone down there, it's a national crisis that has to be addressed by the President of the United States. I mean, quite honestly, Joe Biden has done a horrific job. This is his responsibility. He has caused this, not the governor of Texas. The governor of Texas, I went down there. These are small counties, not a lot of population. I mean, you see on TV Eagle Pass where 50,000 people have come through there, and that's a town of 20,000 people. The people that live there can't go to the hospital. They can't, they can't go to the grocery store. I mean, it's really boggling down. They don't have the police force, the resources to handle that. And, in defense of the governor of Texas, he had to do it because only the Illinois governor, the governor of California, the governor of New York have the ability to get Joe Biden to do his job, which is to secure the border, and he has not done it. Joe Biden's the problem. The border has to be secured before we deal with anything else. And it's not a Republican or Democratic issue. This is not about not liking, people, from other countries. That's not. This is a national security issue. And when you go down there, they will tell you that it is about the fentanyl crisis. There's the number of drugs that are coming into this country now has doubled, tripled, quadrupled. And it's about fentanyl, and it's about the cartels moving that in. The migrants are pawns in this drug crisis, and it's a war that, quite honestly, we need to declare the cartels as terrorist organizations, which is what they will tell you in Texas when you go down to the border. And it's not a political thing about Republicans and Democrats. It's about our own national security. It's a national security problem that's got to be stopped.
So again, that's State Representative Mike Coffey, and talking about the priorities that they share with Democrats about the Smart Start program, but those can get crowded out with the ongoing issues, the southern border impacting the migrants coming to the state of Illinois, costing hundreds of millions of dollars. Somebody rightly points out this issue about, Tnieber says Smart Start good, Invest in Kids bad. We'll touch on Invest in Kids because there are a couple of schools that are closing because the Invest in Kids program has expired. And all of this talk about shared priorities. But Coffey goes on to talk about the need to find out how this money is being spent in Illinois and to get to the bottom of how they can possibly curb some of the spending on the migrant issue, and it really starts with federal policy to close the border, he said.
The big problem that we got is the free health care. Before we had this, it was the free health care that had ballooned. How do you look at the citizens of Illinois, the single moms that go to work every single day and have to pay for their health insurance, and then you are told that people from other countries are just coming in and they're getting free health care? That's got to stop so that we can fund the priorities for the citizens of Illinois.
So again, Illinois does have a program that fully subsidizes the health insurance of migrants in the country, non-citizens who are over the age of 42 and also over the age of 65. They did have to curb new enrollees for the programs, especially as the cost continued to balloon. But all of that, it's essentially taking away resources from other areas. You can see, obviously, if it's going to impact, say, the Smart Start spending, but you do also have the end of the Invest in Kids program, which did not take tax dollars out of tax coffers for the state. It was merely a tax credit program. So it wasn't like, there was a line item in the budget that said we're going to give $100 million to private schools from the state budget. No, the program was a tax credit saying that if people donated to a fund to give to kids for school choice to go to private schools, they would get a 75% income tax credit for the state of Illinois. So it would just mean that there wouldn't be that amount of money going into the state budget. So what you had, of course, is all of the debate about that program that didn't happen. They did not even have committee hearings on possibly extending the program before the sunset on December 31st of last year. While that sunset came and went, the Invest in Kids School Choice Scholarship Program, Illinois' only school choice program, ended at the end of last year. And a headline here, we'll just share this with you. This is from St. Francis of Rome in Cicero and St. Adillo in Berwyn, both closing in June. The news release I've got here, it says that education leaders, parents, and students gathered at St. Francis of Rome in Cicero in response to the Archdiocese of Chicago announcing the closure of their schools, along with St. Adillo in Berwyn. The majority of the school's students are recipients of Illinois' tax credit scholarship program, and the schools are no longer financially viable since the Illinois General Assembly failed to renew the Invest in Kids tax credit program. At the conclusion of 2023, Empower Illinois stands in solidarity with the parents, students, teachers, and communities of St. Francis of Rome and St. Adillo. Without this life-changing scholarship program, many of those families simply could not afford to attend the school, forcing its closure. And that was according to Bobby Sylvester, Executive Director of Empower Illinois. They say, sadly, we know that these are unlikely to be the last schools to close unless our legislators act this spring to renew the program. We call on all of the Illinois General Assembly to re-engage in the vital work of providing educational opportunities to low-income families and students through this program by passing an extension this spring. Will they do it? We shall see. But obviously, this is some troubling news for people who really benefited from the Invest in Kids school choice scholarship program. But in the conversation about priorities, of course, you've got the ongoing questions about priorities of spending, and a lot of money's going to the migrant issue. And again, the migrant issue is costing hundreds of millions of dollars, but are we getting a good bang for our buck to take care of the humanitarian needs of those migrants? Again, Mike Coffey with some questions about how that's playing out and how much needs to be known about all of this, and how do we get to those answers? Should we see line-by-line spending on these contracts, and who's getting these monies from Illinois tax dollars?
Yeah, we definitely, and I think that's something that the Republican caucus is working on going in there. We are going to have bills that we're going to propose here on what to do about the crisis, and that'll be coming up in the next couple of weeks.
So something else, too, in the conversation about the ongoing migrant issue is what is exactly, an asylum seeker. You had some Republicans earlier this week say that they need to end the state's sanctuary policies through the Trust Act. The Trust Act being a measure that says you cannot have local or state law enforcement work with federal immigration officials in order to go after somebody with an immigration detainment order, if that's the only reason that they are the subject of a warrant. If they are, a violent felon and they're also an illegal immigrant, then, the local and state police can go do that. But if it's only that they're an illegal immigrant, they can't, according to the Trust Act. So what you have is, some people saying we need to end that policy because and also the policies of the free health care for certain migrants and so on, because it attracts people to the state of Illinois who have crossed the southern border in what some say is an illicit manner. Now, Governor J.B. Pritzker has said these aren't, illegal immigrants crossing the border recently. They're asylum seekers. And he says that there's a difference between asylum seekers and those who are illegal or undocumented. Here's the governor yesterday.
Well, I don't want to give a tutorial on the difference between undocumented immigrants and those who are asylum seekers. Asylum seekers are legally in this country. Undocumented immigrants, not. They're undocumented. Asylum seekers are documented. So we address them differently. People who are here legally than people who are not. The discussion about being a welcoming state or a sanctuary state, all of that discussion has always been about what are we going to do about the undocumented people who've been here for decades. They've been holding down jobs. They have apartments or places to live. They are essentially acting as all of the other residents of Illinois are acting in full faith, following the law and so on. And the question about the challenges that are brought up in a press conference like that have zero to do with the current migration crisis that's occurring, which is being fueled by the governor of Texas. People are showing up in Texas. It is a challenge for Texas. There's no doubt about it, and for the nation. And it ought to be addressed on a national basis, not on a piecemeal basis. And the governor of Texas causing problems state by state to the states that he chooses to send people to and concentrate them That ought not be the way that we address this as a country.
So again, Governor J.B. Pritzker doing some talking about the immigration issue and what constitutes an asylum seeker, how that differentiates them from those who are here undocumented or here illegally. But if you read the article at thecentersquare.com/Illinois, Pritzker responds to Republicans calling for end of migrant sanctuary status. You've got the Republicans, State Senator Andrew Chesney, saying that the Trust Act we talked about earlier needs to end. He said we need to anticipate that we're going to communicate with federal authorities when 80% of those asylum applications that are anticipated to be rejected. And you also had State Representative Dan Calkins also say, he said he thinks it's close to 90% of everyone that goes to court for asylum is sent back to their country of origin because they're not legitimate asylum seekers. Well, I wanted to do a little bit of fact checking, and I went and found the National Immigration Forum, and they compiled statistics that showed that the percentage of those who get their asylum granted, in some cases, it is very low. How many people are granted asylum? Nearly 20,500 individuals. This is just fiscal year 2016. 20,500 out of 73,081 were granted asylum. All right, so that is about 28% granted asylum. That's 2016. It went on to talk about how different approval rates vary by court, and they range from 10% to 80% approval rates. So clearly, you can even see a chart here of the denial rates and the number of people seeking the asylum over the span of several years. But I imagine this number, the latest number they have is 2017. I imagine it's going to spike considerably. And again, this is from the National Immigration Forum. So you can look up that fact sheet and see the data for yourself. So clearly, the question is, if we've got this flood of asylum seekers and how that exactly is going to translate to those who are legitimate asylum seekers, we may see a whole bunch of people that need to be deported. And will Illinois follow suit and have some policies in place to allow for that type of deportation? We shall see. I guess it's all about priorities, is how tax dollars are going to be spent. So a little bit of scattershot here, but hopefully you're understanding at least how the lines are being kind of connected and getting those dots all put in place. All right, appreciate you guys hanging out. It's Bishop on Air. Like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and follow along, would you? All right, stay tuned. Many more segments coming up, of course, all throughout the week. We'll do the live show each and every weekday morning, but we segment out our clips as well, so you can see those in a quick digest. So like, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Somebody asked about Spotify. Just search Bishop on Air on Spotify. You should be able to find it really anywhere you find your podcast. So check it out, all right? Stay tuned. We've got some more coming up here with Bishop on Air.